Hey everyone. Ever wonder what happens when those good business loans go bad?
Yeah, I mean, it happens all the time, right?
It does, but today
Yeah.
we're going deep on a wild case
Hmm.
that went all the way to the Supreme Court in India,
Oh, wow.
where high-stakes finance meets your everyday consumer rights.
Interesting.
It'll make you think twice about the lines we draw,
Hmm.
between those Wall Street
Yeah,
deals
yeah, yeah.
and the laws that are supposed to protect the little guy.
For sure, for sure.
So picture this. A company takes out this massive loan
Okay.
to make a Bollywood movie
Well,
with the one and only Rajinikanth.
oh, wow. Okay.
Huge star.
Yeah, I know Regina Camp.
But the film bombs,
Oh,
they
no.
default on the loan and their credit rating. Well, it tanks harder than that movie did at the box office.
Ouch. So what happened then?
That's where it gets interesting. This company actually tried to use consumer protection laws to fight back,
Really?
saying that the damage to their credit score was unfair.
Like they were just an everyday person who missed a credit card payment or something.
Exactly.
Good
The
catch.
bold move,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
very gold.
And this whole thing really comes down to how India's Consumer Protection Act, the one that protects consumers,
Right, right.
how it defines a consumer. Now, you might not know this,
Okay.
but India actually has these special consumer courts
Consumer courts, huh?
specifically made to deal with consumer complaints
Oh, I see.
and provide faster, cheaper resolutions.
Interesting. So like small claims court, but specifically for consumer issues.
Yeah, kind of. You got to remember, India's got a huge population, right?
Makes sense.
And they're really serious about making sure everyone has access to justice, even if you're not some big corporation with fancy lawyers.
So that's what these courts are for.
Yep. They handle things like, if you buy a product that's defective,
Right.
or if you see some misleading advertising,
Mm-hmm.
even if a service you paid for, like, I don't know, a plumber or something,
Okay, yeah.
doesn't deliver what they promised.
So it's like leveling the playing field a bit.
Exactly. But now think about it. How does a company making a multi-million-dollar film
Mm-hmm.
fit into that picture? We're talking at a whole different scale here.
Right. It's not like someone complaining about a broken toaster.
Exactly.
Yeah, how did that work out for them?
Well, the Supreme Court really zeroed in on this key difference,
Okay.
between a business transaction that's all about making a profit
Mm-hmm.
and just a regular person making a purchase for their personal life.
Right. Makes sense.
So in their eyes, could a business ever be considered just a regular consumer under Indian law?
Sometimes, yeah. Like, imagine a small bakery buying a ton of flour to make their cakes.
Okay.
In that situation, they're the consumer, even though they're a business, right?
Okay, I see what you're saying.
The key is that they're using that flour for their own stuff, not trying to sell it directly for a profit.
So it all boils down to the intent behind the purchase.
Exactly. Now, back to our Bollywood case.
Right.
The Supreme Court was very clear. Borrowing money to produce a film, something that's clearly meant to rake in the cash.
Yeah.
Well, that's straight up commercial transaction with all the risks that come with it.
I get it. It's like trying to return a car after a cross-country road trip.
Yeah.
It's because the air conditioning wasn't cold enough.
Yeah.
You used it, took the risk, can't just complain when things don't go perfectly.
Exactly. And the court made it clear that those kinds of inherent business risks, they don't fall under the umbrella of consumer protection laws.
Okay.
Those laws are really there to protect regular people from shady deals or products that just don't work in their daily life.
So where does this leave us? What's the
Yeah.
takeaway for our listeners? Not all of us are Bollywood producers, right?
True. But here's the thing. This case shows us a fundamental difference in how the law treats personal stuff and business deals.
Okay.
And that's a super important distinction, whether you're a big company or just buying a new phone on a payment plan.
I'm starting to see what you mean, but can you give us some more concrete examples of how this actually plays out?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Let's go back to that Bollywood case for a sec. Remember, that production company borrowed a ton of money for post-production work on their Rajinikanth film.
Right. And it all went downhill from there. They ended up defaulting on the loan, which landed them in court, right?
Yep.
The Debts Recovery Tribunal, I think it was called.
Right, the Debts Recovery Tribunal. And here's the kicker. They actually reached a settlement with the bank, paid a big chunk of change to close the case. You'd think that'd be the end of it, right?
Yeah. Seems pretty straightforward. They paid up, so everything's settled. What more could there be?
Well, hold on a second. The company claimed that even after settling up, the bank kept reporting them as defaulters to those credit rating agencies. And that's what really sparked this whole consumer protection argument.
So they were basically saying, hey, we made good on the debt, but you're still messing with our credit score, making it harder for us to borrow money in the future. That's got to be frustrating.
Exactly. And this is where things get a little tricky. You see, under India's Consumer Protection Act, there's this thing called deficiency in service that can be grounds for compensation. The company argued that the bank's actions, reporting them even after the settlement, well, they said that was a deficiency in service, causing them even more financial harm.
Okay, so they're trying to use those consumer protection laws as a shield, even though the whole thing started with a business loan. Clever, but did it work?
Well, not quite. The Supreme Court wasn't buying it. They pointed out that businesses getting into ventures like film production, well, they're knowingly taking on a certain level of financial risk.
So it's kind of like saying you can't blame the casino if you lose all your money playing poker. It's a gamble, and sometimes you lose.
That's a perfect way to put it. The court was basically saying that business decisions, even those involving loans, come with a different set of rules and expectations compared to your everyday consumer transactions.
This is making a lot more sense now. But let's bring it back down to earth for a second. How does this affect regular people who aren't running around making movies?
Great question. This case actually has some important lessons for all of us, even if we're not rubbing shoulders with Bollywood stars. First off, it highlights how crucial it is to do your homework before signing anything. Whether you're a business owner applying for a loan or just someone thinking about a mortgage, you absolutely have to understand the terms and conditions.
Don't just sign on the dotted line without thinking about what could happen down the road.
Exactly. Read the fine print, do your research, and don't be shy about asking questions or even getting some legal advice if something's not clear.
Solid advice. What else should people keep in mind, especially with all this in mind?
Another big takeaway is that these consumer protection laws, they're not set in stone. As technology changes and new ways of doing business pop up, the law has to adapt. So staying up to date on your rights as a consumer is more important than ever.
So it's not enough to just know the rules. You got to keep up with the changes, too.
Exactly. It's like updating the software on your phone. You don't want to be running on an old version when some new bug comes along, right?
Makes sense. You're making me want to check for legal updates along with my app updates now.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about businesses, but what about regular people, everyday consumers? How does this ruling affect them?
Well, this actually kind of reinforces things for individuals who are looking for protection under that Consumer Protection Act. The court made it super clear that those laws are still a powerful tool for dealing with issues in those everyday transactions. So if you run into a faulty product, some tricky advertising, or a contract that just seems off, don't hesitate to stand up for yourself.
So it's good news for the average consumer then, like the court's saying, don't worry, we still got your back.
Exactly. It shows they're committed to protecting individuals while also recognizing that business transactions have their own set of rules.
That's a crucial distinction for sure. But I'm wondering, with more and more business and consumer stuff happening online these days, does this case have any implications for the digital world?
Oh, absolutely. The lines between consumer and business are definitely getting blurrier online. We've got those gig platforms, online marketplaces, all these new ways of doing business that challenge how we usually think about these things legally.
So is the law even equipped to deal with all these changes? I mean, what about AI, blockchain, the metaverse? It's like the Wild West out there.
You're not wrong. And that's why cases like this one are so important. They force us to ask some tough questions about whether our current laws can keep up and whether we need new rules to make sure things stay fair and transparent in these new online spaces.
You know what I'm thinking about? The gig economy. You've got people driving for ride-sharing apps, delivering food, doing freelance work. Are they consumers or businesses? It's such a gray area.
You hit the nail on the head. These new models are really pushing the boundaries of how we define things legally. It'll be fascinating to see how the law adapts.
It's like trying to fit square pegs into round holes sometimes. So what's next? How do we make sure consumer protection keeps pace with all this crazy technology?
Well, legal experts and policymakers are already working on that. We might see new definitions of consumer pop up, ones that are tailored to the specifics of online transactions.
So instead of just focusing on who's buying what, we might also factor in the platform they're using, the tech involved, and how they're interacting online. That makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. And we might also see new rules for online platforms to make sure there's fair competition, data privacy, and accountability in these fast-changing digital marketplaces.
It's clear that this case from India, while specific to that situation, has sparked a much bigger conversation about the future of consumer rights in our increasingly digital world. It's a good reminder that the law isn't static. It has to evolve to meet the challenges of our time.
Absolutely. And as informed citizens, it's crucial for us to stay engaged, ask tough questions, and advocate for a legal system that's fair, just, and responsive to the needs of both individuals and businesses in this rapidly changing landscape.
This whole conversation has been really eye-opening. But before we wrap up, I'm curious, can you give us some practical examples of how this distinction between consumer and commercial transactions might play out in real life?
Absolutely. Let's say you have a small business owner, a baker we'll call Sarah, who takes out a loan to buy a brand new oven for her shop. Now imagine that oven turns out to be faulty and she can't bake her cakes.
Okay, so even though the loan itself was for a business purpose, the oven is a consumer product, right?
Exactly. In this scenario, Sarah could potentially argue that she's protected under consumer protection laws, even though the issue stemmed from a business loan. The faulty oven is a separate transaction that falls under consumer protection.
So she could go after the oven supplier directly, even if the loan itself was considered a commercial transaction. That's interesting.
Right. It highlights how important it is to consider the specific transaction where the problem occurred. Now let's imagine a different scenario. What if Sarah takes out a loan to expand her bakery into a new location, but the expansion fails and she defaults on the loan?
That's a tough situation, but it sounds like a business risk, not necessarily a consumer protection issue.
You're exactly right. In this case, the loan was directly tied to a business decision, an investment with inherent risks. The failure of the expansion, while unfortunate, wouldn't automatically qualify her for the same level of protection as someone who bought a defective product for personal use.
So even though Sarah's a small business owner, the purpose of the loan and the nature of the risk are crucial factors in determining what legal avenues are available to her.
Precisely. It reinforces the importance of understanding the context of each transaction, not just the size or type of business involved.
Okay, let's try one more example. What about a freelance graphic designer, let's call him David, who takes out a personal loan to buy a high-end computer for his work?
That's a great one. In this case, even though the computer is used for his freelance work, the loan itself wasn't specifically designated as a business loan. So if he had issues with the financing terms or the lender engaged in unfair practices, he'd likely be protected under consumer protection laws.
So the way the loan is classified makes a big difference, even if the ultimate use of the purchased item is work-related.
Absolutely. It all comes down to the intended purpose of the loan. A personal loan used to buy something for work is still generally considered a consumer transaction.
These examples really drive home the point that understanding the nuances of these financial agreements is crucial for everyone, whether you're running a business or just managing your personal finances.
Couldn't agree more. And if you're ever unsure about your rights or the legal implications of a specific situation, seeking legal counsel can be incredibly helpful.
It's like having a guide in a complex maze, someone who can help you navigate the twists and turns of the legal system.
Exactly. Having a knowledgeable attorney in your corner can make all the difference in protecting your interests and ensuring a fair outcome.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored a fascinating case from India, unpacked the difference between consumer and commercial transactions, and even looked at how these principles might apply in the ever-evolving digital world.
It's been a real deep dive exploring the complexities of business finance, consumer rights, and the legal frameworks that govern these interactions.
Any final words of wisdom for our listeners as they navigate the world of loans and financial agreements?
My advice: always read the fine print and don't be afraid to ask questions. If something seems unclear or unfair, speak up. Knowledge is power, and understanding your rights as both a consumer and a potential business owner can be truly empowering.
Beautifully said. On that note, we're wrapping up this episode of The Deep Dive. We hope you've enjoyed this journey into the fascinating and sometimes confusing world of loans and consumer rights.
And remember, whether you're a seasoned business professional or just starting out, staying informed and engaged is the key to navigating the complexities of the modern marketplace. So keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep exploring the fascinating world around us.
Until next time, stay curious.
For sure. Let's rewind back to that Bollywood case for a sec. Remember that production company, Ad Bureau Advertising PVT Ltd.? They borrowed a hefty sum for post-production work on their Rajinikanth film.
Right, and things went south pretty quickly. They ended up defaulting on the loan, leading to a legal battle at the Debts Recovery Tribunal, right?
Exactly. And get this, they actually reached a settlement with the bank, paid a substantial amount to close the case. You'd think that'd be the end of it.
Seems logical. They paid their dues, so everything's squared away.
Not so fast. The company claimed that even after the settlement, the bank continued to report them as defaulters to credit rating agencies. That's what really kicked off this whole consumer protection argument.
So they were saying, hey, we made good on the debt, but you're still trashing our credit, making it harder for us to borrow money in the future. Tough spot to be in.
Exactly. And this is where things get really nuanced. See, under India's Consumer Protection Act, a deficiency in service can be grounds for compensation. The company argued that the bank's actions were just that, a deficiency, causing them even more financial harm.
Okay, so they were trying to use consumer protection laws as a shield, even though their initial issues stemmed from a business loan.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But the Supreme Court wasn't convinced. They pointed out that businesses engaging in ventures like film production are inherently exposed to financial risks.
So it's like saying you can't blame the casino if you lose all your money playing poker. You took the risk. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose.
That's a great way to put it. And the court was essentially saying that business decisions, even those involving loans, come with a different set of rules and expectations compared to those everyday consumer transactions.
This is all starting to make a lot more sense now. But let's bring it back down to earth for our listeners. How does this impact everyday folks who aren't exactly running movie studios?
Great question. This case has some important takeaways even for those of us who aren't rubbing elbows with Bollywood stars. First, it highlights the importance of due diligence. Whether you're a business owner applying for a loan or an individual considering a mortgage, it's crucial to understand the terms and conditions fully.
Don't just blindly sign anything without understanding the potential consequences down the line, right?
Exactly. Read the fine print, do your research, and don't hesitate to ask questions or seek legal advice if something seems unclear.
Solid advice. What else should people keep in mind, especially in light of this case?
Another crucial takeaway is that consumer protection laws are constantly evolving. As technology changes and new business models emerge, the legal landscape adapts. So staying informed about your rights as a consumer is more important than ever.
So it's not enough to just know the rules. You have to keep up with the updates, too.
Exactly. Think of it like updating your phone's software. You don't want to be running on an outdated version when a new threat emerges, right?
Makes sense. You're reminding me to check for legal updates along with those app updates. Okay, so we've talked about businesses, but what about regular people, everyday consumers? How does this ruling impact them?
This case actually serves as a reassurance for individuals seeking protection under the Consumer Protection Act. The court made it clear that these laws remain a powerful tool for addressing wrongs in personal transactions. So, if you encounter a faulty product, misleading advertising, or an unfair contract term, don't hesitate to assert your rights.
So this ruling is actually good news for the average consumer. It's like the court is saying, don't worry, we still have your back.
Exactly. It reinforces the commitment to safeguarding individual consumers while acknowledging the distinct legal framework that governs commercial transactions.
That's a crucial distinction. But I'm wondering, as business and consumer interactions increasingly happen online, does this case have any implications for the digital world?
Absolutely. The lines between consumer and business transactions are definitely blurring in the digital age. We're seeing the rise of gig platforms, online marketplaces, and a whole slew of new business models that challenge traditional legal frameworks.
So is the law equipped to handle these rapidly changing landscapes? I mean, what about things like AI, blockchain technology, the metaverse? It's like the Wild West out there.
It is, and that's precisely why cases like this one are so important. They raise critical questions about the adaptability of existing laws and the need for new regulations to ensure fairness and transparency in these emerging spaces.
I'm thinking about the gig economy specifically.
Yeah.
You have people driving for ride-sharing companies, delivering food, doing freelance work. Are they considered consumers or businesses? It's a gray area for sure.
You hit the nail on the head. These new models are pushing the boundaries of traditional legal categories, and it will be interesting to see how the law adapts to these evolving dynamics.
It's like trying to fit square pegs into round holes.
Yeah.
So what's the next step? How do we ensure consumer protection keeps pace with these rapid technological advancements?
Well, legal scholars and policymakers are already grappling with these questions. We might see new definitions of consumer emerge, tailored to the nuances of digital transactions.
So instead of just focusing on who's buying what, we might also consider the platform they're using, the technology involved, and the nature of their online interactions. That makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. And we might also see new regulatory frameworks for online platforms to ensure fair competition, data privacy, and accountability in these rapidly evolving digital marketplaces.
It's clear that this case from India while specific in its context, has sparked a much broader conversation about the future of consumer rights in our increasingly digital world. It's a reminder that the law is not static. It must evolve to meet the challenges of our time.
Absolutely. And as informed citizens, it's crucial for us to stay engaged, ask tough questions, and advocate for a legal system that is fair, just, and responsive to the needs of both individuals and businesses in this rapidly changing landscape.
This has been really fascinating.
Yeah.
But, okay, before we go, can you give us some real-world examples of this whole consumer versus commercial thing? How it might actually play out.
Sure. Let's say we've got a small business owner, a baker. We'll call her Sarah. Sarah takes out a loan to buy a fancy new oven for her bakery. But the oven is a dud. Totally faulty. She can't bake anything.
Oh, no. That's a baker's worst nightmare. But the loan was for her business, so
Yeah.
wouldn't that be a commercial transaction?
The loan itself, yes. But the oven, that's a consumer product.
Ah, I see. So even though it stems from a business loan, she could still be protected under consumer protection laws.
Exactly. She could potentially go after the oven supplier directly, even if the loan itself wasn't covered.
So it's really important to look at the specific transaction where the problem happened.
Absolutely. The details matter. Now let's flip the script. What if Sarah takes out a loan to, say, open a second bakery location,
Okay.
but the expansion fails and she can't pay back the loan?
That's rough. But it sounds more like a business risk, not really a consumer protection issue.
Right, you are. That loan was directly tied to a business decision, an investment, and investments come with risks.
So even though she's a small business owner, the purpose of the loan and the type of risk involved really make a difference.
Exactly. It's all about context, not just the size of the business.
Okay, last one. What about a freelance graphic designer? We'll call him David.
Okay.
He takes out a personal loan to buy a top-of-the-line computer for his work.
Interesting. So in this case, even though he's using the computer for work, the loan itself wasn't specifically a business loan.
Right, it was a personal loan.
So if he had problems with the loan terms or the lender was doing something shady, he'd likely be protected under those consumer protection laws.
So the way the loan is classified is crucial.
For sure, even if what he bought with it is for his work.
These examples really show how important it is to understand the ins and outs of these financial agreements.
Absolutely. Whether you're running a business or just handling your own finances, it pays to know the details.
And hey, if you're ever unsure, talk to a legal expert, right?
Always a good idea. They can help you navigate the legal maze and make sure your rights are protected.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from Bollywood to bakeries to the digital world.
It's been a real deep dive into the world of loans, consumer rights, and all the legal stuff that goes with it.
Any final thoughts for our listeners as they head out into the world of loans and finances?
My advice, always, always read the fine print. And don't be afraid to ask questions. If something seems off, speak up. Knowing your rights is powerful, whether you're a consumer or thinking about starting a business.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So on that note, we're wrapping up this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of loans and consumer rights.
And remember, staying informed and curious is key, whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out.
Until next time, stay curious.